The scalpel in my hand moved with a speed that was unusual for the operating room. We had already been working on the patient for a long time, and his heart had stopped twice on the table. Dr. Cole, the attending surgeon, had stepped back from the table, and I could see the defeat on his face. Blood was pooling in the surgical site, making it hard to see. The monitors above us were beeping loudly, signaling the danger. The anesthesiologist's voice was tense as she announced that the patient's blood pressure was dropping again. But I was the resident in the corner, the one nobody really knew, the one they sometimes called the Shadow. I stepped forward without being asked. My hands moved with a precision that seemed to surprise everyone. They were steady, even as the situation in the room felt chaotic. In about 40 seconds, I managed to do what the 3 experienced surgeons in the room had not. My fingers found the source of the bleeding, tied it off, and I stabilized the torn vessels with movements that felt automatic to me. The monitors changed their tune, beeping back to a steady, strong rhythm. The chief of surgery, Dr. Mark Griffin, had been watching the whole time from the observation deck above us. He was leaning forward, his hands pressed against the glass. He asked the question that would change things for me. "Who is that surgeon who just did that?" The scrub nurses looked at each other, seeming unsure. One of them finally spoke, her voice quiet. "She's just a resident, sir. She's been here for about 3 months." Dr. Griffin's eyes focused on me as I stripped off my gloves. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even look at the patient I had just helped save. I just nodded once to Dr. Cole, who was still standing there in shock, and walked toward the OR doors. "What's her name?" Dr. Griffin asked. The nurse checked the chart. "Race. Dr. Elena Race." He watched me disappear, and he probably had a feeling that my name was going to become important. The patient was completely stable within the next hour, but the feeling in the OR was strange. Dr. Cole, the attending who had frozen, couldn't look at anyone. He knew what had happened. He knew that a first-year resident had just saved a life he was ready to give up on. The other staff whispered among themselves, looking at the empty spot where I had been standing. Nobody there had seen surgical technique like that before. When the surgery was finally over and the patient was moved to recovery, Dr. Cole was alone in the scrub room, staring at his own hands. They were shaking. He had been a surgeon for 15 years, and tonight he had been outperformed by someone who shouldn't have had nearly his experience. He looked at his reflection and saw fear and shame. He wondered who I was and where I had learned to operate like that. 3 months ago, I had walked through the front doors of City General Hospital with everything I owned in a single duffel bag. "My name is Elena Race. At least, that's what my paperwork says now. That's the name I gave them when I applied for the residency position. It's the name I use when I introduce myself. It's not a complete lie, but it's not the whole truth either. The truth is complicated, and for me, complicated is dangerous. So I keep things simple. I keep my head down. I do my work. I don't make friends. I don't ask questions. And I definitely don't let anyone ask me questions." The residency coordinator, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Alvarez, had looked at my application with obvious skepticism. My resume was thin. I graduated from a mid-level medical school. I had no research publications, no letters of recommendation from famous mentors, just the absolute minimum required to qualify. "We don't usually accept residents with your profile," she had said, her finger pausing over the "Reject" button on her computer. I sat across from her in that small office, my hands folded in my lap, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the best response. After a long moment, she sighed and clicked, "Approve. You'll start Monday. Don't make me regret this." I didn't thank her. I just nodded and left. My first day at City General was what I expected. It was a blur of orientations, paperwork, and curious looks from the other residents. They were younger than me, most of them right out of medical school, eager and ambitious. They traveled in groups, comparing their scores and telling stories about their college achievements. I stayed on the periphery, trying to be invisible. That's where I needed to be. During the welcome speech, Dr. Mark Griffin stood at the front of the auditorium. His silver hair caught the light, and his voice commanded attention easily. "In this hospital," he said, his eyes scanning the room, "you will earn respect through skill, dedication, and humility. You will be tested every single day. Some of you will rise to the challenge. Others will not." When his gaze landed on me, it lingered for a moment too long. I felt my pulse speed up. I looked down at my hands and waited for him to look away. That night, I unpacked in the small on-call room they assigned me on the 4th floor. The room was tiny, barely large enough for a bed and a locker, with a small window that looked out over the parking lot. I didn't mind. I had slept in much worse places. I pulled out my few belongings: 3 pairs of scrubs, a change of street clothes, a toothbrush, and a small wooden box wrapped in a cloth. I set the box on the narrow shelf above the bed and stared at it. I hadn't opened it in 2 years. I wasn't going to start now. There was also a photograph, face down, in the bottom of my bag. I left it there. Some things are better left buried. The first few weeks passed in a haze of exhaustion and routine. I volunteered for every shift nobody else wanted: the overnight traumas, the post-op monitoring, the cases where the patient was already in bad shape and survival was unlikely. The other residents started avoiding me, not because they were mean, but because I made them uncomfortable. I didn't fit in. I didn't laugh at their jokes, or join them for coffee, or complain about the attending physicians. I was a shadow, and they treated me like one. That was fine. I preferred it that way. But Dr. Griffin noticed. I could feel his attention on me. He watched me during morning rounds, his eyes sharp and assessing. He watched me in the OR, standing in the observation deck with his arms crossed. He watched me in the hallways when he thought I wasn't looking. What did he see? Did he see a struggling resident? Or did he see something else, something that didn't add up? One evening, about 6 weeks into my residency, I was in the skills lab practicing sutures. The lab was supposed to be empty at that hour, and I tensed up when I heard the door open. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there watching me work. My hands didn't shake, but my heart was pounding. Finally, he spoke. "You have excellent technique," he said. "Where did you train?" I kept my eyes on the suture pad. "Medical school. Same as everyone else." "Which school? Does it matter?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He was quiet for a moment. "I suppose not, but I'm curious. You operate with a confidence that most residents don't develop until their 3rd or 4th year. It's unusual." I tied off the suture and set down the needle driver. "I had good teachers." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't satisfied with my answer. "Well, keep up the good work, Dr. Race." He left, and I sat there in the empty lab, my hands finally starting to tremble. I knew then that I was on borrowed time. Dr. Griffin was smart, and he was suspicious. It was only a matter of time before he started digging. And if he dug deep enough, he'd find things I couldn't afford for him to find. That night, I lay awake in my on-call room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of sirens. I thought about leaving. I thought about packing my bag and disappearing before anyone could ask the questions I couldn't answer. But something stopped me. Maybe I was tired of running. Maybe I wanted to prove that I could still do this, that I could still be a surgeon, even after everything. Or maybe I was just too stubborn. Either way, I stayed. And 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. The night it happened started like any other. I was on trauma call, standing in the ER with a cup of bad coffee, waiting for the night's chaos. It came at 11:47 p.m. A 32-year-old male from a car accident, a high-speed collision with multiple traumas. The paramedics wheeled him in, his face pale, his breathing shallow, blood soaking through the bandages. GCS of 10, BP dropping, suspected internal bleeding. The lead paramedic listed off as we moved him into the trauma bay. Dr. Cole was the attending on call, and he took charge, barking orders. I stood back, waiting for an assignment. The patient crashed within minutes. His blood pressure disappeared, and the monitor started its loud alarm. Dr. Cole called for blood, for fluids, for every intervention, but nothing was working. I could see it in his face, the moment his confidence left and panic took over. "We need to open him up," I said. Dr. Cole shot me a look. "We don't have time to get him to the OR." "Then we do it here," I said. He hesitated, and in that second, the patient's heart stopped. The monitor flatlined. The room burst into activity. Chest compressions, epinephrine, the crash cart. They got him back once, then he crashed again. Dr. Cole froze. I saw it happen. The exact moment he gave up. His hands just hovered over the patient. Useless, and his eyes went distant. That's when I moved. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for orders. I just stepped forward, grabbed the scalpel from the tray, and made the incision. My hands moved on pure instinct, muscle memory taking over from years of practice. I found the bleeders, clamped them, tied them off. I stabilized the torn vessels and packed the wound. 40 seconds. That's all it took. The monitors beeped back to life, steady and strong. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at me. The nurses, the other residents, Dr. Cole. I looked up and saw Dr. Griffin standing in the doorway of the trauma bay. His face was impossible to read. Our eyes met. And I knew. I knew that my quiet, invisible life here was over. I stripped off my gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and walked out of the trauma bay without saying a word. My hands were steady, but inside, I was falling apart. Behind me, I heard Dr. Cole's voice, shaky and confused. What the hell just happened? Nobody answered him, because nobody knew. Nobody except me. The next morning, I was summoned to Dr. Griffin's office. The message came to my pager at 7:00 a.m., just as I was finishing my shift. Report to Chief of Surgery immediately. I stood outside his office door for a full 2 minutes, my hand hovering over the handle. Every instinct was screaming at me to run. I could disappear. I'd done it before. I could be gone before anyone even noticed, just another resident who couldn't handle the pressure and quit. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Maybe I was just tired of running from my past. I knocked. "Come in," his voice called. The office was what I expected. Walls lined with diplomas, shelves filled with medical journals. A large desk was covered in paperwork. Dr. Griffin sat behind it, his fingers steepled, his eyes fixed on me. "Sit," he said. I sat. He didn't speak right away. He just watched me. Finally, he leaned forward. Last night, you performed an emergency thoracotomy in the trauma bay. You made decisions that most surgeons with 20 years of experience would hesitate to make. You executed a procedure that requires not just skill, but real hands-on life-or-death experience. He paused. Where did you learn to do that? I kept my face neutral. Medical school. Residency training. Same as everyone else. His eyes narrowed. Your file says you graduated from a mid-tier program 2 years ago. No honors, no research, no surgical fellowships, no trauma rotations at major centers. Yet you operate like someone who's seen 1,000 traumas, like someone who's worked in a war zone. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't let it show. I don't know what you want me to say, Dr. Griffin. I want you to tell me the truth, he said, his voice hard. Who are you really, Dr. Race? The silence stretched between us. I could feel the walls closing in. I could feel the weight of every lie I'd told starting to crumble. But I held his gaze and said nothing. After a long moment, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. I don't know what you're hiding, but I will find out. I have resources, and I don't like mysteries in my hospital. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. I stood and turned toward the door. I was almost out when his voice stopped me. One more thing. We have a VIP patient arriving tonight, Congressman Robert Shaw. Acute abdominal pain. Possible surgical intervention. The press will be watching. The hospital's reputation is on the line. He looked at me. I want you on the surgical team. I should have said no. I should have walked out of that office and never looked back. But instead I heard myself say, I'll be there. As I left, I felt like a trap was closing around me. Congressman Robert Shaw arrived at City General Hospital at 9:13 p.m. in a convoy of black SUVs. I watched from a third-floor window as security personnel checked the entrance. This wasn't just a patient. It was a political event. The congressman was 63 years old, a decorated veteran with a long career. If anything went wrong, it would make national headlines. I scrubbed in at 9:45 p.m. alongside Dr. Cole and 2 other attending surgeons. The OR was cleared of all non-essential staff. Armed security stood outside the doors. The atmosphere was tense. Dr. Cole made the first incision at 10:02 p.m. It was supposed to be a standard appendectomy. His hands were steady. I stood across from him, assisting and watching. But the moment he opened the abdominal cavity, everything changed. Oh, God, Dr. Cole whispered. It wasn't a ruptured appendix. It was a perforated bowel. It was septic, and the infection was spreading rapidly. The smell hit us immediately. This was now a life-threatening emergency. Dr. Cole's hands faltered. I saw the fear in his face. We need to call in a specialist, he said. There's no time, I said. If we don't control this now, he'll go into septic shock in minutes. He'll die on this table. Dr. Cole looked at me, and I saw him make the decision. He was going to step back. He was going to let me take over. Do it, he said quietly, moving aside. I stepped into position, and my hands went to work. Debride the necrotic tissue. Irrigate the cavity. Resect the damaged section of bowel. My movements were automatic, precise, born from years of experience that nobody in this room knew I had. The OR was silent, except for the beeping of the monitors. I could feel everyone watching me, but I couldn't stop. The congressman's life was in my hands. And then, from somewhere beyond the surgical drape, I heard a voice, weak and slurred from the anesthesia, but clear enough. I know you. My hands froze, The suture needle hovered in midair. Slowly, I looked up at the congressman's face. His eyes were half open and unfocused, but they were looking right at me. "Syria," he whispered. "You were there. You saved my son." The room felt like it was spinning. My heart slammed against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. Dr. Cole's voice cut through the fog. "Dr. Race, what is he talking about?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. Because if Congressman Shaw remembered me, if he remembered what I'd done in that field hospital 3 years ago, then everything I'd run from was about to catch up to me. I finished the surgery in complete silence. My hands moved mechanically, completing each step while my mind raced. The congressman's words echoed. "Syria, you saved my son." I tied off the final sutures and checked that the abdominal cavity was clean. The monitors showed stable vitals. He would survive. But would I? Dr. Cole stood beside me, his eyes full of questions he didn't ask. The scrub nurses exchanged glances. Everyone had heard what the congressman said. I stripped off my gloves, dropped them in the bin, and walked toward the OR doors. "Race, wait," Dr. Cole started, but I was already gone. I made it to the locker room before my legs gave out. I sat on the cold metal bench, my head in my hands, trying to control my breathing. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurring. Syria. 3 years ago, I'd been Captain Elena Race, MD, United States Army, attached to a forward operating base. I was a trauma surgeon operating in a field hospital under constant threat. We treated soldiers, civilians, anyone who came through our doors. It was brutal, exhausting, and the most alive I'd ever felt. Michael Shaw had been brought in on a stretcher, his uniform soaked in blood, his chest torn open by shrapnel. He was dying. The base was under orders to evacuate. Enemy forces were closing in. Command had given us 20 minutes to pack up and move. But I couldn't leave him. I wouldn't. I'd operated on that kid for 2 hours while mortars fell around us, while my commanding officer screamed at me to abandon the patient and get on the helicopter. I'd saved Michael Shaw's life, and I'd been court-martialed for it. The door to the locker room opened. I looked up and saw Dr. Griffin standing there, his face unserious. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a dark suit. "We need to talk," Dr. Griffin said quietly. "Not here," the woman added. "Somewhere private." I stood up slowly. "Am I under arrest?" The woman's expression didn't change. "That depends on what you tell us, Captain Race." The use of my rank hit me like a physical blow. They knew. They knew everything. "My office, now," Dr. Griffin said. I followed them through the empty hallways. I was tired. So tired of running. Maybe it was time to stop. We reached Dr. Griffin's office, and the woman closed the door. She pulled out a badge. "FBI Special Agent Evans. Sit down, Captain." I sat. Dr. Griffin remained standing, his arms crossed. Agent Evans opened a tablet and turned it toward me. On the screen was my military service record. Captain Elena Race, trauma surgeon, decorated for valor, court-martialed for disobeying direct orders, dishonorably discharged. "You were one of the best combat surgeons in the military," Agent Evans said. "You saved hundreds of lives, and then you threw it all away to save one lieutenant against direct orders." She paused. "Why?" I looked at the screen, at the photo of myself in uniform. "Because he was 19 years old," I said quietly. "Because he had a family waiting for him. Because leaving him to die would have been murder, orders or no orders." Agent Evans studied me. "Congressman Shaw has been looking for you for 3 years. After you were discharged, you disappeared, changed your name, erased your records, started over. He wants to thank you." I laughed, a bitter sound. "Thank me? I lost everything because of that decision. My career, my reputation, my entire life." "And you'd do it again, wouldn't you?" Dr. Griffin said softly. I met his eyes. Yes, every single time. Before anyone could respond, the hospital's emergency alarm system blared. A mechanical voice echoed, "Mass casualty event. All available surgical staff report to the emergency department immediately. Repeat, mass casualty event." Agent Evans's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, and her face went pale. "Chemical plant explosion 15 miles from here. Estimated 40 to 60 casualties incoming." Dr. Griffin was already moving toward the door. He looked back at me. "How many mass casualty events have you handled, Captain?" "More than anyone in this building," I said. He nodded once. "Then let's go. We'll deal with the rest later." The emergency department was already descending into chaos when we arrived. Nurses were setting up triage. Residents were pulling crash carts. Dr. Griffin immediately took command. "Listen up. We have multiple critical patients incoming. Chemical burns, blast injuries, respiratory distress. I want trauma teams in bays 1 through 6. I grabbed a pair of gloves and headed toward Trauma Bay 1, but Dr. Griffin's hand on my shoulder stopped me. "Not there," he said. "You're with me. We're taking the worst cases." He led me to the main trauma bay. "You've done this before," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Then I need you to forget you're a resident. I need you to be the surgeon you were trained to be. Can you do that?" I looked at him, and for the first time since I'd arrived at City, General, I didn't hide. I just nodded. "Yes, sir. I can do that." The first ambulance arrived 3 minutes later. A woman in her 40s, her skin blistered from chemical burns, her breathing labored. Dr. Griffin and I moved in sync. Airway first. I intubated her while he established IV access. Then fluids, pain management, burn assessment. We stabilized her and moved her out. The next patient arrived before we'd even finished. Then another, and another. The ER became a war zone. Patients on every gurney, blood on the floors, the constant sound of monitors and shouting. I moved through it all like I was back in Syria. My training took over, my hands steady, my mind clear. Dr. Cole appeared at my side during a brief pause. "Where did you learn to work like this?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "In hell," I said simply, and moved to the next patient. Hours blurred together. I lost count of how many patients I treated. At some point, I looked up and saw the other residents watching me, their faces a mixture of shock and respect. I wasn't the shadow anymore. Around 3:00 a.m., the flow of patients finally slowed. The last critical case was stabilized. I stood in the middle of the trauma bay, my scrubs soaked, my hands finally starting to shake from exhaustion. Dr. Griffin approached me. 37 patients, he said quietly. 0 deaths. That's because of you." I shook my head. "That's because of all of us." "No," he said firmly. "That's because we had a combat surgeon leading triage, someone who knew exactly what to do." He paused. "I was wrong about you, Captain Race. I thought you were hiding something shameful. You were just hiding your skill." Before I could respond, Agent Evans appeared in the doorway. "Congressman Shaw is awake," she said. "He's asking for you." My stomach dropped. "I don't think that's a good idea." "He's insisting," she said. "And given what you just did tonight, I think you've earned the right to hear what he has to say." Dr. Griffin nodded. "Go. I'll handle the cleanup here." I followed Agent Evans through the quiet hospital. Congressman Shaw's room was on the VIP floor, guarded by 2 agents. Inside, the congressman sat propped up in bed, his face pale but alert. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Captain Rice," he said, "I've been looking for you for 3 years." I stood in the doorway, frozen. "Senator, my son is alive because of you," he interrupted. "Michael is alive. Married, with a daughter now. He's a teacher. He has a life. And he wouldn't have any of that if you hadn't refused to leave him behind." The words hit me hard. "I lost everything for that decision," I said quietly. "I know," he said. "And that's why I've spent 3 years trying to find you. To fix it." He reached for a folder on the bedside table and handed it to Agent Evans, who passed it to me. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were official documents, military records, legal papers. "I've been working with the judge advocate, General's office," Congressman Shaw explained. "Your court-martial was reviewed. The dishonorable discharge has been overturned. You've been granted an honorable discharge with full benefits and back pay." I stared at the papers, unable to process it. "I don't understand." "You were punished for doing the right thing," he said. "For saving a life when everyone else was ready to write it off. That's not a crime, that's heroism, and I made it my mission to ensure the military recognized that." Tears blurred my vision. "Why?" "Because my son gets to watch his daughter grow up," he said simply. "Because you gave our family a future. And because what they did to you was wrong." Agent Evans spoke up. "There's more. The congressman has also been in contact with the medical board. Your medical license, which was suspended after your discharge, has been fully reinstated. You're no longer a resident, Captain. You're a fully licensed trauma surgeon." I couldn't speak. 3 years of running, of hiding, of pretending. And in one night, it was all over. "I don't know what to say," I finally managed. "Say you'll stop hiding," Congressman Shaw said. "Say you'll go back to being the surgeon you were meant to be. This hospital needs you." I looked down at the papers in my hands. "I'll think about it," I said. The congressman smiled. "That's all I ask." I left his room in a daze, Agent Evans walking beside me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "you decide who you want to be. Captain Elena Race, trauma surgeon, or Elena Race, resident. The choice is yours." I walked back through the hospital. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I thought was lost forever. Hope. When I reached the main lobby, I saw Dr. Griffin waiting for me. "Agent Evans called ahead," he said. "I know everything now." I braced myself, but instead he extended his hand. "Welcome to the surgical staff, Dr. Race. We're lucky to have you." I shook his hand, and something inside me finally settled. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," he said with a slight smile. "I'm putting you in charge of our new trauma protocol. If we're going to handle events like tonight, we need someone who knows what they're doing. Someone with real experience." I nodded. "I can do that." "I know you can," he said. As I walked out of the hospital into the early morning light, I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding for 3 years. My brother answered on the second ring. "Elena? Is that really you?" "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking. "It's really me. I'm coming home." 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the surgical staff during morning rounds, no longer wearing resident scrubs, but the white coat of an attending physician. Dr. Griffin had made the announcement the day before. Dr. Elena Race, formerly Captain Race of the U.S. Army Medical Corps, was joining the staff as the new director of trauma services. The reactions had been mixed. Some were thrilled, especially those who'd worked with me during the mass casualty. Others were skeptical. But Dr. Griffin had made it clear my experience was unmatched. Now I stood before them, preparing to present my plan. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady. "For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Elena Reyes. Before I came to City General, I spent 6 years as a combat trauma surgeon in Syria and Iraq. I've operated in field hospitals under fire and treated mass casualties with limited resources." I paused. "I'm telling you this because trauma medicine is war. It's chaos. And if we're going to save lives, we need to be prepared." I pulled up a presentation. "Over the next 6 months, we're going to implement a new trauma protocol based on military combat medicine. We're going to run regular mass casualty drills. We're going to cross-train surgical and emergency staff. And we're going to create a rapid response team." Dr. Cole raised his hand. "With all due respect, Dr. Reyes, this sounds expensive." "Congressman Shaw has secured a federal grant for hospitals implementing advanced trauma protocols," I said. "City General has been selected as a pilot site. The funding is approved." Murmurs of surprise went through the room. Dr. Griffin stood up. "Dr. Reyes has my full support. I expect all of you to give her the same." As the staff filed out, Dr. Cole lingered. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "That night in the trauma bay when I froze. You saved that patient's life. You saved my career. And I never thanked you." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "You just need to learn from it. Freezing happens. We just can't let it happen twice." "Will you teach me," he asked, "how to stay calm when everything's falling apart?" I smiled. "That's exactly what this new protocol is for. You'll learn." After he left, I stood alone in the conference room. 3 months ago, I'd walked into this hospital with nothing but a fake resume and a need to disappear. Now, I was standing here as myself. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "Mom wants to know when you're coming to visit. She's been cooking for 3 days." I smiled and typed back. "Tell her I'll be there this weekend. And tell her I'm bringing someone." I'd started seeing Michael Shaw, the lieutenant I'd saved, the congressman's son, for coffee. It had been awkward at first, but we found common ground. We were both trying to figure out how to move forward. Maybe we could figure it out together. That evening, I returned to my apartment, a real apartment now, not the on-call room, and finally opened the wooden box. Inside was my military Medal of Valor, the one they'd given me before the court-martial. I'd never felt like I deserved it. But looking at it now, I realized something. I hadn't been punished for doing the wrong thing. I'd been punished for doing the right thing in a system that couldn't handle it. I placed the medal on my bookshelf. My phone rang. "Dr. Griffin, we've got an incoming trauma. Multi-vehicle accident on the highway. ETA 5 minutes. I need you here." I grabbed my keys. "On my way." As I drove, sirens wailing in the distance, I felt a sense of purpose. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The trauma came in fast. 3 vehicles, 7 patients, 2 critical. I moved through the ER, directing residents, coordinating with attendings, making split-second decisions. Dr. Griffin worked beside me, and for the first time, I felt like I had a true partner. We saved 6 out of 7. The 7th, a teenage boy, died on the table despite everything we did. I stood over his body, feeling the familiar weight of loss. You can't save everyone. Dr. Griffin found me in the scrub room afterward, staring at my hands under the water. You did everything you could, he said quietly. I know, I said. But it still hurts. Good, he said. The day it stops hurting is the day you need to quit. I'm still here because every life we save makes up for the ones we lose. It's not about perfection. It's about showing up every day and fighting like hell. I nodded. I can do that. I know you can, he said. We walked out of the hospital as the sun began to rise. Dr. Race, Dr. Griffin said as we reached the parking lot. Yes? Thank you for not giving up on yourself, on this hospital, on medicine. We need people like you. I felt tears in my eyes. Thank you for giving me a second chance. You earned it, he said. As I drove home, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the battlefields of Syria to a tiny on-call room. From a court-martial to a senator who spent 3 years making it right. From a ghost in the halls to the director of trauma services. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. I was finally home. Not in a place, but in a purpose. 3 months later, I stood in the same conference room. It was filled with staff. Dr. Griffin stood at the front. I want to thank all of you, he said. Our trauma outcomes have improved by 40%. Our response times are cut in half. We've handled 3 mass casualty events without a single preventable death. He paused. This is because of Dr. Race's leadership and your dedication. Applause filled the room. Dr. Griffin gestured for me to stand. Dr. Race, would you like to say a few words? I stood and looked at the faces of my colleagues. When I came to this hospital, I was running from my past, I said quietly. I thought I'd lost everything, but you all showed me something I'd forgotten. That medicine isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, doing the work, and never giving up on the people who need us. My voice grew stronger. That's what makes us healers, our refusal to give up, our commitment to fight for every life, every time. Thank you for giving me the chance to remember that. As the meeting ended, Michael Shaw appeared in the doorway, smiling. Hey, he said. Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab dinner. My shift had ended an hour ago. I'd love that. We walked out of the hospital together into the evening air. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. You look happy, Michael observed. I am, I said, and I meant it. We walked down the street, 2 people who'd been through hell and found their way back. I thought about Dr. Griffin's question from so long ago. Who are you really, Dr. Race? Now I finally had an answer. I was a surgeon, a healer, a fighter. I was Dr. Elena Race, and I was exactly where I was meant to be.